Welcome to the wrap-up episode for Season 7 of What I Did Next from A&T Media. I'm Malak Fuad. I'm joined today by the show's producer Chirag Desai to look back at the season, at some of the highlights and themes from our latest lineup of incredible guests. You'll also hear from Mostafa Gad, Global Head of Investment Banking at EFG Hermes, an EFG Holding Company. EFG Holding has been an incredible partner for the show, and I talked to Mostafa about his life's trajectory and his stellar career with the bank. But first, Chirag takes over as host today. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
So, hello, Malak.
Hey, Chirag.
Saying welcome to yet another wrap up. How fast has this season gone? Seems like an understatement.
It's insane.
But it is also reality as to how quickly not just the season has passed, but I think also with the amount of content we've been through this cycle, I feel like it's a little bit more as well. Obviously, we're doing the subscription, so we're pulling out a lot more interesting content for our bonus episodes. We'll talk about YouTube as well. So there's so much work that's happening that I don't really know where the time went.
That's right. And I think that, as you said, we are an audio business, but, in order to support that, you have to be visible on every platform, every channel. You want to try and capture as many eyeballs, as many earbuds, eardrums as possible. And you just need to be visible everywhere. And so we're finding ourselves positioning ourselves in many different places. And it's exciting, actually. One of those places is LinkedIn, where we're making a much bigger effort.
I think the other sort of higher level note, because this is also something that just as a general trend that we're seeing in the space, is starting to think of the show is and A&T Media largely as more a content company, although it is podcast first and audio first, right? So that's still going to be the core of what's happening.
Yeah.
But there is such a large audience on YouTube. YouTube has done a bit of work in integrating with podcast apps and the podcast feed over the last year. So that's been really nice. But my expectation perhaps was that, our video clips, which we're doing a lot of, will do well on YouTube, which they have.
Yeah.
But the surprise was that the audio episodes are doing really well on YouTube as well. Like we've got a good number of listens on those, and people are consuming that
It's
content
impressive.
there. Right?
But I think the interesting thing for me on that is it kind of reinforces the idea that people have preferred platforms and they have habitual places that they go to. So if you are someone who's always gone to YouTube, then you find an audio clip, you will listen. Your
Right.
natural habitat is YouTube, so you're receptive to whatever is on the platform, right?
Absolutely.
We have audiences who are purely Instagram, and consume us purely as social media clips. And then you have those dedicated diehards who have been with us from the beginning, who are pure audio. And I find that interesting, this idea of the natural gravitation of our audience to different media.
In fact, I'll add one more there, right? There's the newsletter, which is a
Exactly.
written extension of the work we're doing, and that has its own audience.
That's right.
So last season, we did some additional work with our amazing sponsors, EFG Holding, who've been with us, right from the start. And we did this sort of special episode with them, at the end of our season. And we saw just an equal amount of engagement, on the newsletter for that episode. So I thought that was, again,
Yeah.
it's again another indicator of what you're saying, which is people like to
Yeah.
consume the written content, so they're continuing to consume it.
And an extension of that, if we just delve for a second into advertising as a podcaster, the key, I think, is to make sure that your advertiser corresponds to your own ethos and matches your product. And I think that's very much the case with EFG. We have similar profiles. We're reaching similar audiences, so there's a synergy there. That means that when we push out content from EFG, people are receptive and they want to hear about it and they want to read about
Absolutely.
it, they want to listen to it, and so on. So that's a very important factor for us as a business, to make sure we're attracting the right caliber of advertisers that match our audience, match our ethos.
And then, of course, we've been seeing our diehard fans who are joining us on this sort of subscription journey with us, right? So they're getting all of this extra content. And so what we do, in case you didn't know, is that we have a bonus episode with each and every single one of our guests. which is this sort of deep dive, often into their industries, other tidbits that happen, during the course of the conversation with Malak, of course. And I think, I mean, I'm obviously enjoying sort of all of these additional little nuggets that we're getting, especially as someone that loves to hear about these different industries. And the good thing, of course, is that the moment you sign up to be a member, you can get all of the bonus episodes that we've done so far. So it's not only about the new ones, right? So yeah, check it out.
I love that because it allows us to really go deep into the person's life, but also really delve deep into their work. And this bonus episode began because we had so much great extra material
Mhm.
that didn't fit into the tight mold or the thematic of our show, which is life journeys, pivot points.
Yeah.
But we had so many amazing stories from their careers that we felt there was an audience for that extra content.
So let's talk a little bit about our guests this season, and I kind of want to start with this idea of the overdue guests, right? So this season we actually had the culmination of many years of waiting for a couple of
That's
guests, right?
right.
So Janan was like that, where we've been trying over a year to get her on the show. Dr. Munir, I think you've been trying since we started.
And Hatem Al Akil as well, Chirag.
Yeah.
Hatem and I had talked a year ago, and it took 2 seasons to make it happen, basically. So he was another one that I'd been talking to for quite a while. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's a little behind the scenes of how long it takes for certain turnarounds to
yeah,
happen. Dr. Munir was on, I think, that initial list that we put together at the start of season one, or right after season
yeah,
one, I think.
absolutely.
And it took 3 years to make that one happen. So
Yeah,
it's just interesting that like we had this nice culmination of course,
that's
an
right.
amazing roster and guests, but many of them who have been on our wish list for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, it's always amazing when not only when you finally get the people you want to get, but when they exceed your expectations once they're on. And the funny thing about these interviews, Shirag, that is that, some of these people I've never met in real life.
Right.
And Hatem is one of those people. I've never met him in real life. So we've chatted quite a lot of many, many times on screen on Zoom, but never met. And I was in Dubai in February to interview Janan, and you and I, of course, had some meetings. And I was meant to meet Hatem on that trip. It didn't happen, but it's funny when you're able to do an interview and it exceeds your expectations and it's online as well. So there's that added what might be perceived as a barrier.
Mhm.
But in the case with Hatem, it didn't feel like that at all. You mentioned Janan as being another person who'd been on the books for a while, and we're very old friends. And so when we did have the interview, it felt like a sort of a coming home and
Yeah.
a sort of a eureka moment. It was really nice. It was really
Yeah, it
nice.
was it was actually fun because you opened
Yeah,
talking about sort of your memories of her from school. So it's a very different kind of
exactly.
relationship compared to, and then
Yeah,
you, like you said, I
exactly.
think at the other end of the spectrum you had Hatem. You also had Becky, right, who you haven't met in person, which I think comes to something we've spoken about before, but about the fact that our guests have been so forthcoming and open about their journeys and talking about their learnings, often their mistakes, right?
Of
And sort
course.
of bringing all of that together, because I think that's what makes these interviews so powerful.
Yeah, and I also think that regardless of where they are on their path, we've been really lucky to have people who have been so open and so willing to share. And I'm going to give you an example from a few years ago where we had Fatma Saeed, the wonderful Egyptian opera singer, the soprano, and she was relatively young, beginning her career, her international career, but an ability to share and to be willing to be open about what she loves, what she's excited about, the things that matter, the challenges she had faced already, even though she was quite young. I find it extremely enriching, extremely positive, and very heartwarming when I see people doing that because it's a way of giving back and it's a way of nurturing people to join their industry, to join their profession by discussing their own journeys. It really uh, allows people to imagine themselves in a similar path.
Which reminds me as well, right? So this season, you were asking everybody, no matter where they were in their careers, what is the kind of legacy they wanted to leave, what is some of the things they want to be remembered for. And I think that
Yeah.
was really nice because it kind of gave you the answer to what you just described, right? What is it that they want someone maybe joining the profession today to know? What is it that they want to do, in terms of the kind of impact they want to leave, right? And everybody had these, almost, I think everybody had answers to that question that were linked to the work they were doing already.
Yeah.
Becky mentioned that she's doing the work with, well, she's doing a lot of work with CNN Academy, and kind of creating sort of these young breed of journalists who are trained by experienced stalwarts from the network.
I have made a real point of ensuring that we provide proper platform for women's and young girls' voices.
Yes.
On whatever story that we do.
Yeah. And I also think the other thing that came out very strongly with that legacy question, and I'm thinking particularly of Becky, of Munir, of Malak El Baba, and Janan. The four of them spoke about legacy in terms of the effect they have on other people,
Mhm.
whether it's family. Janan spoke about wanting to instill in her children certain principles, whether it's like Dr. Munir, who's hoping that, on a much larger scale, humanity will know how to rein themselves in.
Right.
And then, of course, Becky is trying to inspire specifically young women and girls in the
Mhm.
Middle East. And Malak El Baba mentioned very much teamwork as being an essential part of who she is.
Being an enabler to let even few people discover the talents that they might have and not aware of, similar to the experience that I personally went through. But I think the empowerment and the enablement and the growth of people around me is something that I think I do well. I can definitely do more. So I'm working very much on my coaching skills nowadays. This keeps me quite busy.
Good. I think the true mark of success is not material things. No one has ever mentioned to us in this legacy question, "Oh yes, I want my legacy to be that I'm a billionaire, or that I have 1,000 houses, 10 houses and a boat and cars." No one's ever going to say that, because that's the reality. Is that doesn't make you happy. That it's not going to keep you warm at night. But the effect you have on people is what really counts.
Speaking of material things, right? So I'm thinking of also Mo Al Fayed, who called that specific thing out.
Being young in your 30s, you're chasing the business classes, the first classes, the Rolex, and then the Rolex is not enough. I want an AP, and the AP is not enough. I want a gold AP, and I want a second home in Marbella, and I want, and I was on that trajectory. After burying Marwa, I come out of the grave and I'm shaking hands with people. I met no less than 50 people that are not family, they're not relatives, they're not coworkers. There are people that Marwa had done something for. And that moment was a defining moment in my life. That's when I wore nothing but black t-shirts and white t-shirts, average run-of-the-mill clothes. I drive a Ford. I live at a normal home. It doesn't matter what's in the bank account. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or tens of dollars. It does not matter anymore.
When we come back, we talk about a theme that came up frequently this season, destiny, and we look at other highlights that came up from the last few episodes. That's right after this break. Welcome back. I'm Malak Fuad, and you're listening to our wrap-up episode with my producer, Chirag Desai.
One of the things also I wanted to bring up, which has to do with the opposite of a lot of guests that we see, which is, oftentimes a lot of people know what they want to do early in life, or at least have some semblance of the fact that they want to be off to a different path, if not the path they're on. But we had two guests this season who absolutely had no idea, right, what they wanted to do. And in fact, we're deliberately prolonging their university life so that they wouldn't have to make that decision. And, one of the things that I have often thought about is this idea that like no decision is also a decision, right?
Yep.
And I mean, Dr. Munir he explained that even further, right? Where he actually said that he looked at all the paths that he could be as an engineer, like all the outcomes, and he didn't like any one of them.
And to be able to afford my apartment, I had to work. I responded to an advert by a blind professor, Professor Helmut Schultz. I went to Professor Schultz and I said, Professor Schultz, I don't think I want to continue with my degree. And he said, listen, you've invested a lot in your education. Let me think about it. That's what he said. A week or so later, he said, Munir, how about environment? And it was him who hit that spot.
Mo, on the other hand, went on vacation to Miami, loved the city, and decided to just, U-haul
Stay
himself
on. Yeah,
across country.
absolutely.
And then both of them, incidentally, had to go back to finding jobs that they were like, we'll do anything just as long as we can pay rent. And both of them found their paths through that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Destiny, it's a big word, right? It's a very loaded word. With destiny, you have to be open to it, right? Because we can all be presented with options. We can all be presented with things that, sound interesting, but a lot of people don't choose those paths that might lead somewhere different. There's a lot of people who like conformity and who like the safe path, and I think that's probably the majority of people. But the people who take that call and follow that path called destiny are the risk takers, are the ones that I think are aware that there's a moment that they need to grasp and they need to, you know, take it by the balls, if I'm allowed to say that, and say, okay, I'm going to try it.
Ancient wisdom would tell you that even the people that like conformity are ultimately going down their destiny, right? Like it's
I
one of
guess
those
so.
things,
I
right?
guess
Like,
so. I
but
guess
but
so.
but
You're
but I,
right.
but I mean, I get your point, which is essentially that there needs to be some level of acceptance as to what's coming, and keeping yourself open to having a pivot that might change your path, right? Which I think is what we see repeatedly from our guests.
Exactly. You have to consciously be willing to take that journey, right?
Yeah, and so let's look at like someone like Janan, right, who landed up finding her career because she was escaping a situation, a relationship situation, but in Egypt.
My dad just freaked out. I remember he got me the map of the States and just put it out in front of me, and he's like, right now, you choose a city to go live in it. And I just started panicking. But he's like, this can't happen. So I did that. I took the next flight out, and I chose DC because it reminded me of London. So I'm walking down the street, and I see a billboard on a wall saying mural assistant needed. And it was just like a lightning bolt just hit me in the head. Like, I just realized this is what I wanted to do. I don't know why. It was that moment. I'll never forget. It was like, that's what I want to be doing. I want to be painting buildings.
That's a level of destiny that I don't think a person can really comprehend or plan for, right? You can't plan and say, well, I'm deciding not to do X, and because I'm doing Y, I'm going to find my path in life. Like that's crazy. But again, like when I think of Malak Al-Baba, in her interview, she was actively going down something else. And
That's right.
her CV got switched with her sister, and
It's amazing.
you just think about when you
It's like a movie.
I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, that makes you would think on paper that would make no sense. And yet here we are, right? And today she's leading Visa, right? And so it's clearly
amazing.
she was, she was going down an interesting path.
So the other thing, Chirag, that's really interesting is you mentioned that there were a couple of our guests who discovered late in life what they wanted to do, which is Munir and Mohammed Al Fayed. But what I've noticed over the seasons is that most creative people tend to know very early on, firstly, that they are creative and that they want to pursue it. It's like a vocation. I think it's like wanting to be a doctor, or someone who wants to be in some form of religious position. You can try different things, but at the end, that is what's going to happen for you. And one example of that is Hatem El Akil. He worked in a bank, I think, when he started out. because that was what it was expected. But he very quickly realized this is not for me, and he made a switch. I want to know how your family reacted when you left the banking world and the more corporate, traditional, conventional world.
My mother, Allah yarhamha, and my brother were always very supportive in all the decisions that I make. I always went by the beat of my own drum, and I was always very stubborn. So there wasn't any any kind of
They had no choice.
they didn't really have any choice. No.
And then the other person we haven't mentioned yet in our wrap up is Ghada Amir. Ghada Amir is, firstly, one of the most important female artists in our region. An incredibly important voice, and she's internationally renowned. And I think a lot of people in the region don't know her, but she's better known in on the international art scene than she is in our own region, I think.
Right.
But for those who have heard her interview, her passion and her need to create is all consuming, and
Mm.
she is has been willing to sacrifice so much in order to create art. And you know that for me is fascinating, and it's nothing will stand in her way to do that. So I found that interesting. That people who are creative tend to know and identify that very early on. We were really lucky as well, Chirag, this season that we got some amazing press about the show.
Yeah, we'll link to all the different mentions in the show notes as well.
One that stood out for me is Entrepreneur Middle East, where I wrote an article about my own journey in podcasting, but also about the podcasting industry in the Middle East and how I see it evolving, and the challenges and the exciting element of being part of something so new. And it's under my own byline, which is nice. So it's my own opinion.
We talk about it a lot offline in terms of the kind of outreach and how we want to, just like, we've been asking our guests, kind of like the impact we want to have, both in terms of obviously putting out all of these amazing interviews and inspiring people, but also in terms of, other creators.
Exactly. And anyway, it's not, we've been getting amazing press from day one, but it's accelerated a bit more this season. So that's great.
So finally, I think we have a couple of shout outs to give,
We do.
for our season. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a particular shout out I want to give to someone who is a fitness instructor and whose classes I attend at Amina Naguib's studio. Her name is Karima El Hakim, and Karima is an amazing girl who works in the VC world. She works with a company called Plug and Play Maritime, and she is this dynamo of a person who loves to connect people to each other. And she was so sweet, and she actually introduced me to two of our guests this season, Malak El Baba and Mohammed El Fayed, and she thought they would be fantastic for the show. So Karima is a funny one because um, uh, I haven't known her very long, but and I was attending her classes for a while, and then suddenly she discovered the show, and I think she discovered it on her own, and she started binge listening to it because she travels a lot.
All right.
So she got off a plane once and she texted me. She said, "I've just listened to like 8 episodes back to back." And she was like telling me her opinion on each one.
Well, with my producer hat on, I'll take away the good feedback that our show is bingeable, which is always a target that we want to have. And you don't want people to kind of listen to 2 or 3 episodes and be like, "Oh my God, that's a bit too much." So that's nice to know that
Yeah,
people are able to
absolutely.
listen to 8 at a time.
And so eventually I said to her, "Listen, Karima, you're very plugged in, you know so many people. If you have recommendations, let me know." And so she's one of these girls who doesn't do things in half. So she gave me an extremely long list of people. And then luckily, Malak and Mohammed came on the show, and they're fantastic episodes. And so I wanted to thank Karima for her input and tell her to keep coming.
We also want to give a shout out, of course, to EFG Holding, who've been a very good partner for the show, and in terms of their support and everything that they're doing. Obviously we love what they do as a company, but we also
Yeah.
love the support they're giving us to
Absolutely.
to keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're an amazing partner to have. They're doing incredible work across not just the region, but all of the emerging markets. So we're excited to always, to have them on board with us.
Absolutely. And of course, we can't wrap this up without a thank you to you, dear listener, for tuning in and being there. Because it's your support ultimately that makes this show happen, and all, it's not just the listening, but the amazing responses we get, whether it's on social media. I mean, we talked this time about LinkedIn. We've been getting comments on YouTube now, which has been absolutely fun to read and listen to all the feedback and a couple of discussions that have happened there. So yeah, thank you.
And the other thing is that we love it when our audience send us reviews. And so if you're enjoying the show, please review us, send us messages any way you like. You can do it on our website, on your podcast player, on social media, by email, any form you want. And we very often include our reviews during our hiatus period. We incorporate it into our marketing. So you might find your name pop up. So it would
Yeah,
be great to hear
send
from
us
you
nice
directly.
creative reviews, and we'll
Yeah,
post them, right? So that's a
exactly.
nice little
Exactly.
little way to do that. Yeah.
And then I just want to close by saying that a video is now proving to be a very important part of podcasting. And that's proving to be the case across the whole world. And we're making a very big effort on YouTube, but we're also positioning ourselves now on TikTok because a year ago I think it was, the social media team and you, Chirag, told me you have to get onto TikTok. It's a medium we need to get onto. Go and check it out. And for all of you listening, TikTok is now how I relax.
Wow. Okay, that's news. By the way, that's news even to me, right?
Yeah. So it's my dirty little secret. So I'm sitting there on TikTok and my kids come in and they're like, not again, and I'm just scrolling through just really silly videos. But it is an amazing place for podcasts, and more podcasts are coming onto TikTok. So we are on TikTok. That's a growing area for us. And so you can check us out there as well. To close out the episode, I'm joined by Mostafa Gad, Global Head of Investment Banking at EFG Hermes, an EFG Holding Company. Mostafa focuses on equity capital markets and debt capital markets, including advisory for IPOs and M&As across EFG Hermes' footprint in MENA. Mostafa has been at EFG for nearly a decade, but he actually studied to become an engineer and pivoted to finance after he graduated. He grew up in Kuwait, and our conversation begins there.
Back in the days, in the 80s and 90s, Kuwait was the Dubai of today.
Exactly.
It was the more progressive, open market, multicultural. But unfortunately, due to the conflict that took place, we had to move back to Egypt. I think we moved back. My dad chose to live in Alexandria, although we originally from Cairo.
Why did he do that? Interesting.
It's more of he found it a little bit moving from the environment he used to be in Kuwait, with the compound kind of quietness that you get from living there, into Cairo. It was too much for him, and he thought that having a home beside the beach and beside the sea could be a little bit more calmer. So I was raised, again, second part of my childhood and teenager years in Alexandria, where I finished my school and the IGCSEs, and then I went to engineering within the Alexandria University.
And so how did you make the jump into finance and banking? That's a big pivot, actually, for you.
It was.
That's the basis of this show. We talk a lot about people's turning points.
Yeah, absolutely.
You started on one path, but then very quickly decided it wasn't for you.
Yeah, it was a result of two things. One is I was not that satisfied with the job of the engineering side that I was performing, and on the other side, I had a lot of my network, my friends, and people that I grew up with already joined finance. By the time of 2003, 2004, you found all the big banks coming to open up shops in Egypt, HSBC, Crédit Agricole, Citi, all of these kind of big names, they made their entry.
It was the beginning, really, of the
Of the
evolution
wave, yeah,
of investment banking. Yeah,
yeah, and even on the commercial side. So it was
Yes.
only National Bank of Egypt and Bank of Misr running the show in the 80s and the 90s, but starting the 2000s, we found the global names coming in. And on the other side, I found it maybe the mathematical side of it is kind of easy. Because
I
at the
mean,
end
from
of
an
the day,
engineering background, you
yeah.
can absorb that. Did you do an MBA to give you those
No,
extra skills?
what I did, I found an opening with HSBC. They didn't mind your background, and they took you on a path in a credit course. It was a very, very famous credit course, again, back in the days, for a 9 month. It was also not only shifting career, but also shifting the way I live, because this was the first time I leave my family house and I leave Alexandria. I came to Cairo, live alone. So there was this level of
It was a
independence.
change. Yeah.
Yeah, 21 years
You
old.
became an adult, Mustafa, at that
Yeah,
point.
exactly. And I graduated a little bit young, so I started my career actually before I turned 21. So my first payment was actually made by me in cash, not even a bank transfer, because I didn't have a bank account.
And so, what year did you join EFG?
I think mid 2007. It was me and another friend of mine that we came from HSBT to join EFG. And we started from there, building my experience, understanding a new field. Very interesting time. Initial days was fantastic for Egypt, for the deal flow. So Egypt was the top name when it comes to the emerging markets and the MENA region, and EFG was the strongest brand there. So cannot wish for a better
it's a
home
perfect
to be.
combination of things.
Absolutely. And I witnessed all the growth going into opening our offices in Dubai and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Jordan, expanding really fast and really dominating this market for a long time.
Yeah, and so you've been in that department ever since, and now you're heading it. When did you become head of the department?
2016. Yeah, it's almost 10 years.
Yeah, I'm always very interested when people spend such a long time working in the same either department or company, and you become the institutional memory of the company. Your knowledge dates back for so long. It becomes a very important tool, I think, just in and of itself. Being someone who's been with a company for so long, it's a very important thing for the company to have.
Absolutely, but let me be fair also with this point, because I think, to be fair to other places and other jobs, maybe yes. If you don't find this level of excitement and dynamism in your workplace, it's really tough for you to survive in the same department doing the same job for, let's say, 20 years.
Definitely. And EFG has evolved so much over the years, going from an Egypt-focused bank, then a regional bank, then an emerging frontier bank. I mean, and you've been there at every step of the way, so the job is always evolving, right?
Exactly. That, and this is why we never get really tired in terms of boredom of the job, because it's always different when you deal with different countries, different sectors, new sectors coming in. So let's say 10 years ago, the tech wasn't there. So now 5 years ago, we need to learn something new for all of us, how to look at tech companies, how to value tech companies, and how to go into this field. So there's new sectors coming in the market that you need to, again, start from the beginning, learn all about it again, and see how you can advise on it.
Yeah. What are the other benefits for you of being with EFG? I mean, what is it about EFG that you like? The work culture? What is keeping you, so engaged with the company?
The main thing is the people. I think people quit the job because they don't like the team that around the boss and stuff like that. But when you have a very young team, so I think age gap between the highest in the rank, which is Karim Awad, and the smallest analyst that we have is what, 20 years, 23 years. That's it. That's
very,
the gap.
very small. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we're a very, very young team, kind of coming from similar background, so it's easy to integrate within the culture, within the environment.
Yeah.
So they're not only colleagues, but they're also friends outside of the job. Same like when I started. So I started as these guys are actually my friends, not work colleagues. So it was very, very easy for me to integrate, and the culture was easy to absorb.
Yeah.
So I think people is integral to this kind of
Give me a sense of what
continuation.
a typical day for you is like.
We don't have a typical day. That's for sure.
How do you see the next 5 years in terms of the investment banking department? Are there areas that you are keen to grow? Are there markets you want to grow? Do you want to just keep going with the work you're currently doing, or are there other areas you wish to develop?
Yeah, I think if you ask me today, I think it's more on expanding our product offering rather than our geographical presence. So I think we're happy with the markets that we're operating in. I think there is a very good future, at least for the coming 5 to 10 years, in the markets that we're operating in. A very vibrant economy that are still taking off in terms of deal flow and deal making. If I would start maybe with a very clear and obvious kind of name within the region, which is Saudi Arabia. Saudi used to always have this kind of surplus capital coming from their natural resources and the surplus on their oil trade and the commodities that they have. Back in the days, their main policy was to take a lot of this surplus and to invest it offshore. So they were very active on the outbound kind of M&As.
Yeah.
I think the pivot came where they said this needs to change. We need to
Yeah.
develop Saudi Arabia. So our surplus, the majority of it, will be directed and invested in Saudi.
And I think the reason was also because they realized that the natural resources were finite. There would be a
Absolutely.
time when they wouldn't be there anymore.
And they realized that let's utilize the good days that we have right now and the surplus that are right now. Let's build industries that are sustainable beyond the commodities and really build Saudi Arabia in terms of the depth of economy. So it's not only oil based.
Yes.
And we as a government will take this initiative and we'd like to integrate all the private sector with us. So that's the big headline. This automatically translates in everyone's mind is that there is huge boom is going to happen in Saudi Arabia.
And in every industry, as you
Exactly.
know, obviously every
Exactly.
industry. Yeah.
So they will upgrade the infrastructure. Infrastructure, I mean electricity, water, airports, roads. They will upgrade healthcare. They will upgrade consumer part of the economy. They will help tech to grow. So each and every side of facet of the economy will benefit from this change in policy. And this is exactly what happened. We saw the government take initiatives, but we saw a very, very deep kind of private sector coming in. And the final piece of the puzzle was a huge boom in the stock market. So we see the highest volume of IPOs. I won't say only in the region, but also in the wider region when you consider even Europe. So EMEA, I think Saudi by far is the market to be. It was helped also by the slowdown in Europe.
And at what point did EFG have a physical presence in Saudi?
We always had a physical presence back in the days, but the problem with the Saudi market wasn't then open for foreign capital.
Yes.
So our role was a little bit limited because what we bring on the table is actually our investor base from foreign institutions into the local market. So this is what we've done in Egypt and the UAE. In Saudi, it was a little bit limited until, as I said, this pivot took place and they became more progressive, more open to foreign capital, and it changed the whole scene for us. So we started to be an important player in the IPO market and the ECM market.
Is the IPO market in Saudi your largest market in terms of IPOs for the bank?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Largest terms of deal count and deal size.
And number.
Because as I said, the good part in Saudi Arabia, it's not only government-linked companies that are successful and goes for public markets.
Yeah.
They have a very, very deep economy within the private sector and very diversified economy. So you'll find very interesting stories, as I said, in all verticals of the economy. I think UAE was a pioneer in that. Even before Saudi, they opened up They changed the regulation, opened up also for capital, and they said, look, specifically Dubai, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, they're two different kind of economies, but let's say Dubai, they said, look, we're all about trade and having a wonderful city to live in,
And
build your head
services.
offices there, services are there, and we are a service economy, trade economy. This is what we're going to build, and we'll give the world-class service to everyone coming to living here. It worked really well, fantastically well. And they created a vibrant economy outside of oil. So Dubai is not oil dependent at all.
Yes.
Abu Dhabi, again, a different story, but or related maybe, petchems and all of this. So they integrate each other. So UAE in general is also a very vibrant economy. So I think on the geography, we're fine. I think on the product side, we need to bring more products to the market. So maybe we started this with Egypt when the stock market was a little bit slow, IPOs were a little bit slow. We started our debt capital market activity, which is a very good balance to the equity market. So if people can't really tap the stock market, they need funding at the end of the day. So if it's not capital coming out of the stock market, they will need to get a little bit of debt to get them to the next stage. So that capital market advisory, coming with new products, securitizations, bonds, sukuks, these kind of products worked really well for the past 4 years for us in Egypt. We want to replicate this across the region. So I think it's still underdeveloped in the GCC. So they still rely on the conventional way of lending, which is the conventional loans and sukuks and bonds, but not really updated kind of products.
And how have you dealt with Egypt in the last few years? We've had a very turbulent few years. How have you approached Egypt?
Look, people and investor base need to figure out, and we need to present, Egypt needs to present to the investor universe, what are we trying to actually establish in the coming 20 years? What is it? What is the big plan? So getting out of this firefighting mode, which we've been in for the past 3-4 years, whereby it's all about trying to tackle
Mitigating
a problem here, a
problems.
problem there, and firefighting, and what actually we're trying to build. So I think this should be the starting point.
So be proactive as opposed to reactive.
Exactly. I understand the challenges, because at the end of the day, Egypt is different. First of all, I think we're 3-4 times the size in terms of population, even to the closest one, which is Saudi Arabia, with much less resources, much limited resources. So we need to figure out a way how to address our problems, because we don't enjoy this kind of surplus that Saudi has. But again, we have a lot of things that are working in our favor because of this population. You have a huge consumer base. You have hopefully a good human capital, understanding you don't need to import new brains to the economy to operate certain verticals. You have the calibers there, so you have certain elements that you need to work on, but really identifying what you want to be good at. You want to be more on the manufacturing side, agriculture side, service side, tourism side. You cannot do it all at the same time. So we need to get out of this kind of idea to try and fragment our focus and approach in each and every vertical. So at least this is my understanding, and really focus on 1 or 2 good strength points that we put all our efforts, our investments, and our knowledge into, and get the best out of it.
Once again, a big thank you to EFG for being an amazing sponsor of What I Did Next, and for Mostafa Gad for joining me on this episode. This brings us to the official end of Season 7. We'll be back again with new episodes in September. Until then, you can find us on Instagram, X, LinkedIn, and on YouTube, where we'll continue to share more from our guests. Don't forget, you can also subscribe to us in Apple Podcasts and on our website to get bonus episodes from each of our guests that contain deep dives into their industries, as well as more about their lives. What I Did Next is brought to you by A&T Media. I'm Malak Fuad, and the show is produced by Chirag Desai. See you again soon.